They said wills are supposed to settle families, not destroy them. Yet in this case, every heir named before one man died young, under circumstances too strange to dismiss. What followed made even seasoned investigators whisper about a curse. October 12, 1994. The town record for that day was ordinary enough. Gray skies, light rain, temperatures just above freezing. But in the files of Heir and Associates, a local probate law firm, October 12th was marked with a red underline. That morning, attorney Robert Heir received a call from Mercy General Hospital. Eleanor Thatcher, age 87, had passed away in her sleep. Her name was familiar across the region. The last surviving matriarch of the Thatcher family, who had built a textile fortune in the early 1900s. Everyone in town already knew the family's reputation. For years, whispers followed the Thatchers, a curse. Reporters had called it the line that wouldn't survive. Neighbors kept clippings of the obituaries. Sons drowned in shallow ponds. Daughters struck by fevers doctors couldn't explain. Cousins killed in freak highway crashes. Not one direct heir had lived beyond 40. Now the final Thatcher was gone, but the will that arrived at Heir's desk hours later stunned everyone. Eleanor had not left the estate to any distant Thatcher cousin or institution. Instead, the sole heir named was Daniel Price, a 32-year-old schoolteacher with no apparent connection to the family. You've got the wrong man. Daniel Price was eating breakfast that morning at Rosie's Diner, a chrome-fronted spot off Main Street where he stopped before work. According to the waitress who served him coffee in a chipped mug, Daniel was laughing over the sports section when the payphone near the door began ringing. He answered, still chewing toast. The call was from Heir's office. You've been named sole heir to the Thatcher estate, Robert said. Daniel nearly choked. I think you've made a mistake. I don't know her. I don't know any Thatchers. But the attorney insisted. The documents were clear. Witnesses had signed. It was legally binding. Later, Daniel would tell colleagues he felt like someone had confused me with a ghost. By the end of October, after days of hesitation, Daniel and his wife, Mara, drove their second-hand Ford Taurus across town to the Thatcher house. A Victorian mansion sat at the end of a leaf-strewn cul-de-sac, shutters closed like a sleeping face. Reporters gathered that afternoon. A photograph survives in the Hartford Gazette. Daniel, looking bewildered in his flannel jacket, and Mara clutching her purse tightly, her expression tense. Inside, the house seemed untouched by time. Heavy velvet curtains blocked the sun. Brass lamps flickered weakly when switched on. A black royal typewriter sat in the study, a sheet of yellowed paper still rolled into its carriage. In the basement laundry, glass jars of peaches dated 1962 lined the shelves. Neighbors later admitted they bet money the couple wouldn't last 6 months. Within a week, Mara confided to a friend that she felt the walls had ears. One evening, as she folded sheets in the coat closet, she swore the front door chain rattled. Daniel, upstairs grading history essays, heard it too, metallic clinking like someone trying to slip the lock. When they checked, the chain hung perfectly still. They laughed it off. Old houses creak, they told themselves, but Mara's unease grew. One night she caught her reflection in the hall mirror. Only it wasn't her face staring back. It was a hunter, male, and watching intently. When she gasped, the image vanished. Skeptics might dismiss these accounts as nerves, but town records corroborate parts of their story. A neighbor on Orchard Street filed a police note on November 3, 1994. At 2:07 a.m., she observed Daniel standing barefoot in the yard, staring up at the lit attic window. The temperature was 29 degrees Celsius that night. When questioned later, Daniel admitted he had no memory of stepping outside. When asked what he might have been looking at, his only answer was unsettling. I thought someone was waving at me. Mara begged him to walk away from the inheritance. It's just money, Dan. We don't need this house. But Daniel grew obsessed with the question, why me? At school, colleagues noted he was distracted, yawning through staff meetings, scribbling notes on the back of student assignments. One colleague recalled finding a paper with the phrase, "The will has spoken," written over and over in Daniel's handwriting. He denied writing it. December 1st, the night snow fell heavily. The house was silent except for the hiss of the radiator. At midnight, the lights flickered and died. Mara lit a candle, setting it in her diner mug. Shadows stretched tall across the kitchen walls. From upstairs came a sound neither of them could mistake. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing the hallway. Daniel grabbed a flashlight, but when he clicked it on, nothing happened. He had replaced the batteries that morning. "I'll check," he said. Mara stayed below, heart pounding with each floorboard creak above her. The house seemed to breathe with him. Minutes later, Daniel returned pale. His lips trembled. "There's writing on the wall," he whispered. Together they climbed the stairs. In the bedroom, faint letters crawled across the plaster above the headboard, as though traced by a shaking hand in soot or ash. Every heir met a terrifying end. The message covered the wall where they slept. Mara refused to stay another night. She packed a bag, pleading for Daniel to leave, but he stood frozen, staring at the wall, lips moving silently. "Daniel," Mara urged, tugging his arm. "Please." He didn't blink. "She says it isn't finished," he murmured. The candle guttered. A chill swept the room, and from the study below, the old typewriter began to hammer out letters by itself. They tried to ignore the signs at first, the footsteps, the flickering lights, the missing items. But in cases like this, the smallest details are often the most chilling. And by November of 1994, those details were piling up faster than anyone could explain. November 10th, 1994. It began with a Polaroid. Daniel and Mara had taken it the first week they moved in, standing on the front steps, her in a wool coat, him holding a flashlight like a trophy. They pinned it to the kitchen corkboard. One morning, Mara noticed the frame was empty. She assumed Daniel had moved it. He hadn't. "I thought you wanted it for your desk," he said over his coffee, rubbing his eyes. But the photo wasn't on his desk. It wasn't anywhere. It had simply disappeared. That week, more things went missing. A flashlight from the coat closet. A hymnal Mara kept on her nightstand. Even her Bible, a wedding gift from her aunt, vanished from the bedside drawer. She accused Daniel of misplacing them. Daniel swore he hadn't touched a thing. Town records confirmed that between November 12th, 18, 3 separate neighbors phoned the police non-emergency line about odd behavior at the Thatcher house. One report noted Daniel standing on the lawn at 3 a.m., holding what looked like a candle, staring at the attic window. Another described Mara banging on the back door late one night, shouting to be let in. When police followed up, Daniel insisted it was stress. But Mara later told her sister, "It's like the house wants him and not me. He listens to it. He listens like it's talking." November 19th. Daniel was in the study when Mara heard the typewriter clatter. Curious, she stepped inside. On the paper was a single sentence. "The will has spoken." Daniel insisted he hadn't typed it. His hands were ink-stained from correcting history tests with his fountain pen. The keys, however, were warm to the touch. That night, Mara phoned her mother from the payphone outside Rosie's diner. She didn't want to use the house line. "It doesn't feel private anymore," she said, like someone else is on the line. Later interviews revealed how visible the strain had become. A fellow teacher described Daniel half present, like he was listening to someone no one else could hear. A parish priest remembered Mara whispering after Mass, "If something happens to him, it won't be by accident." Mark my words. When asked why she believed that, Mara only shook her head and said, "It runs in the house." December 3rd. The real escalation began early December. Mara was asleep when a whisper pulled her awake. She thought Daniel was dreaming. But when she opened her eyes, she saw him sitting upright at the edge of the bed, back straight, head tilted slightly as though listening. "Who are you talking to?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. His lips moved soundlessly. Then, in a flat tone, he muttered, "She says I belong here." Mara sat up, heart pounding. "Daniel, there's no one here." But he only turned to her slowly, his eyes glassy. "She says you shouldn't be afraid." In the weeks that followed, Mara began to notice patterns. A Lucky Strike cigarette butt left smoldering on the back fire escape, though Daniel never smoked. The door chain rattled violently at dawn, yet the latch unbroken. Their flashlight reappeared on the basement laundry shelf. Batteries drained flat, the faint scent of lilac perfume in the coat closet, though neither of them used perfume. Each time, Daniel dismissed it. "Old houses play tricks," he muttered. But Mara noticed he was the one most drawn to the noises. He'd linger in hallways, tilt his head toward the floorboards, as if straining for footsteps only he could hear. December 9th. according to archived police logs. Mara called at 11:47 p.m. claiming someone was walking in the walls. Officers drove by but found nothing unusual. The official note concluded no signs of forced entry. Possible stress-related episode, but Mara insisted later that she wasn't imagining things. She said she heard whispering voices between the plaster. December 14th, Mara opened the coat closet to hang her scarf. She froze. Every item that had gone missing, the Polaroid, the Bible, the hymnal, the flashlight, sat neatly stacked on the shelf. On top of them, balanced carefully, was a single page of typewriter text. Every heir must return. When Daniel came home, she shoved the page at him. "You think this is normal?" she demanded. He read it slowly, expression unreadable. Then he smiled faintly. "Maybe it means us." Mara's blood ran cold. December 20th, 1994. Snow blanketed the town, muffling every sound. Mara woke around 3 a.m. to find the bed empty. She padded downstairs, bare feet on the freezing floorboards. From the study came the metallic clatter of the typewriter. She stopped in the doorway. Daniel was seated at the desk, eyes half closed, fingers tapping steadily at the keys. But his hands weren't resting on the keyboard. The keys were moving on their own. Hammering out line after line, Mara leaned closer, horrified as the words stamped across the page. Daniel Price, Daniel Price, Daniel Price. Her husband sat motionless, lips moving in rhythm with the keys, as if repeating every word. December 2nd, 1994, 8:12 p.m. The street was calm, suburban, and ordinary. Neighbors strung up early Christmas lights, plastic reindeer dotted front lawns, and carolers rehearsed inside the parish church 3 blocks away. But inside the Carmichael house, nothing felt festive. Elaine sat at the kitchen table, staring at the worn diner coffee mug she'd brought from her late uncle's belongings. She hadn't meant to take it. It had just been in the box of things the lawyer gave her after the reading of the will. A crack ran down its side, but when she lifted it, the coffee inside was still warm, despite the fact that she hadn't poured it. She froze. Her flashlight, left on the counter from the power flicker earlier that week, rolled on its side as if nudged. No windows were open. No draft. Elaine pushed the mug away, her hands trembling. "Not again," she whispered to herself. December 3rd, 1994, 11:14 p.m. The neighbors reported hearing a scream. Not loud enough to wake the whole block, but sharp, like a startled cry that cut off mid-breath. Elaine later told a friend she had been upstairs in the coat closet, looking for her winter jacket, when she heard a faint mechanical noise. She opened the door and saw, shoved against the back wall, a cassette tape in a dusty case, on its label, written in smudged typewriter ink, "For the next heir." She played it on her old stereo. At first it was only static. Then a man's voice, her uncle's, raspy and deliberate. "We were all marked. Every child in this bloodline. Don't think you're free because you lived. The house doesn't let go. If you're hearing this, you were chosen. God help you." Elaine slammed the stop button. The tape hissed back into silence. December 5th, 1994, 2:30 a.m. The police received a strange call from Elaine's home phone. The dispatcher answered, but no voice replied. Only the faint scratching sound, like someone dragging metal across a wooden floor. When officers checked the house, Elaine was unharmed but pale. She swore she hadn't touched the phone. They left with no report filed. Witnesses later described seeing Elaine wandering her suburban street at night, chain-smoking Marlboro cigarettes, muttering to herself about footsteps in the walls. One neighbor, John Mercer, claimed he heard her talking to someone who wasn't there. She kept saying, "Stop moving things. Stop hiding them." But she was alone. I saw her from my window, December 7th, 1994, 9:45 p.m. Elaine decided to search the basement. She hadn't spent much time there. It was damp, unfinished, the kind of place where old boxes gathered dust. She carried her flashlight down the steps, its beam shaking in her nervous hands. The air smelled faintly of mildew and cigarette smoke. Halfway across the basement, the beam caught something, a small wooden box shoved behind the laundry unit. Inside was a stack of Polaroid photos. Each photo showed a different heir. Some she recognized, faces from framed portraits upstairs, names she'd heard in hushed family stories, but every photo had the same disturbing detail. Behind each heir, faintly visible, was the same shadowed figure, tall, featureless, always standing in the background. At the bottom of the stack, the final Polaroid wasn't faded or old. It was new, fresh, and it showed Elaine herself, sitting at her kitchen table. The same mug, the same coat she was wearing that night. The timestamp written at the bottom in black ink. December 7th, 1994, 9:40 p.m. 5 minutes before she found it, Elaine dropped the photo, her breathing ragged. "Someone's here," she whispered. The flashlight flickered once. Then I went out. When the flashlight blinked back to life, the Polaroid box was gone. So were the photos. Only the last one remained, stuck against the wall with a door chain, as if nailed there deliberately. The figure in the background was no longer faint. It was clear, and it was standing directly behind her. December 10th, 1994. 12:16 a.m. The storm outside rattled the windows of Elaine Carmichael's house. Wind howled down the quiet suburban street. But what the neighbors would later remember was not the storm. It was the sound of Elaine pounding on her walls in the middle of the night, shouting for something to leave her alone. By then, she hadn't slept properly in days. The Polaroid photos were gone except for the one that showed her, the figure looming close behind. She kept it locked in the coat closet, but no matter where she hid it, the photo seemed to return to the same spot, taped to her bedroom door with a strip of the door chain that had once secured the front entrance. She told a friend over the payphone outside the parish church, "It's like the house is alive. Things aren't where I leave them. I hear the typewriter at night. I don't own a typewriter." December 11th, 1994, 2:44 a.m. Police logs confirm a second emergency call from Elaine's house. She was incoherent, whispering that it was standing by her bed. When officers arrived, the front door was wide open. Elaine sat on the floor of her living room, clutching her uncle's Bible, trembling. One officer later wrote in his report, "The house looked normal. No signs of forced entry." The subject claimed she saw a man, tall, featureless, standing over her bed. Nothing was there when we arrived. Elaine begged them not to leave her alone. They told her to rest, promising to check back. They never did. December 13th, 1994, 9:03 p.m. A neighbor recalled hearing the faint clack of keys, like an old typewriter, coming from the Carmichael home. The sound continued for hours. Even after all the lights went out, Elaine herself described what she found the next morning in her journal, later recovered from the scene. Every page in the typewriter was filled with the same sentence. Over and over, "The heir must follow. I don't own a typewriter. But it's sitting in my kitchen now, as if it's always been there." She ripped the paper out. But when she opened her coat closet to hang her jacket that night, the same page was pinned to the back wall. December 15th, 1994. 11:59 p.m. The house came alive. Elaine had been downstairs near the basement laundry unit when she heard footsteps above her. Heavy, deliberate. She thought it was a break-in. She grabbed her flashlight and ran up the stairs. Every light in the house flickered, then went black. The flashlight beam caught something moving at the end of the hall. Tall, too tall to be a person, shoulders brushing the ceiling. Her voice shook as she later told a family friend. It wasn't human. It looked like a shadow, but it moved like it knew me, like it wanted me to see it. She slammed her bedroom door, sliding the door chain into place, but the rattling continued on the other side. Then came the sound of breathing, long, slow, inches away. December 16th, 1994, 3:15 a.m. Elaine placed another call from the payphone outside the highway motel near town. She had fled the house barefoot, cigarette still burning between her fingers. To the desk clerk, she said, "It followed me. I saw it in the mirror of the car when I drove here." That night, motel guests complained of knocking on their doors around 3:30 a.m. The clerk swore the halls were empty. December 17th, 1994, 8:47 p.m. Elaine tried to fight back. She returned to the house with a priest from the parish church. He brought a small hymnal and began to pray in the living room. The air turned colder. The lights above them buzzed, then shattered one by one. The priest stopped mid-prayer, staring at the wall. There, taped with another strip of the broken door chain, was a fresh Polaroid photo. This time, it showed both Elaine and the priest, standing exactly as they were in that moment, praying in the living room. The timestamp at the bottom read, December 17th, 1994, 8:46 p.m. The priest dropped the hymnal. "We need to leave, now." But before they could reach the door, the chain slid across it on its own, locking them inside, and from the darkness of the hallway came the sound of the typewriter, keys slamming, pages tearing free. The words appeared louder than any voice. "The next heir must follow." December 18th, 1994, 12:13 a.m. By the time police were called again to the Carmichael residence, the priest was gone. Elaine stood alone in the driveway, barefoot on the frozen concrete, her hands streaked with ink. She clutched a sheet of typewriter paper so tightly it tore between her fingers. The message on it read, "Only one heir remains." Her account of what happened inside never matched what neighbors reported. Witnesses swore they saw both Elaine and the priest enter the house together. Only one came out. December 18th, 1994, 11:22 p.m. Elaine began searching for records. At the old boarding house on Maple Street, where some of her family's documents were stored, she found a file of cassette tapes and loose Polaroid photos inside a locked cabinet. Each cassette bore the name of an heir who had died mysteriously. Each Polaroid showed the same dark figure standing closer, sharper, more defined with each generation. The last tape had her name written on the spine, Elaine, final. When she pressed play on the boarding house's battered tape player, she heard her uncle's voice again. "It isn't inheritance. It's a sacrifice. Every heir feeds it until none are left. That's why you're alive when the others aren't. You were saved for last." December 19th, 1994, 2:31 a.m. Elaine drove to the Highway Motel, where she had left her suitcase earlier. The clerk recalled how pale she looked, chain-smoking Lucky Strikes, asking if anyone had been in her room. That night, other motel guests reported lights flickering, televisions turning on by themselves, and the distinct clack of a typewriter echoing in the hall. Elaine stayed awake until dawn, writing in her journal. "The Polaroids are no longer old. They're instant. It's taking pictures of me as I move. When I turned my head, one was already on the nightstand. My face, my bed. Timestamp. 1 minute before I looked. December 20th, 1994, 9:18 p.m. The parish priest never returned, but another witness, a church secretary, claimed Elaine had come to the parish that evening, holding a torn Bible page with Psalm 23 circled in ink. She begged for a blessing, telling the secretary, "It won't stop. It's not the house, it's the family, and I'm the last one left." The secretary remembered how the church lights went out during their conversation, and how Elaine froze when she heard a camera shutter click in the dark. When the lights came back, another Polaroid was resting on the church's wooden pew. It showed Elaine kneeling there, the secretary beside her. But in the photo, Elaine was lying down, eyes closed. December 21st, 1994, 11:57 p.m. The confrontation reached its breaking point. Elaine returned to her house one last time, convinced she could end it. Her flashlight cut a narrow beam through the halls, past broken glass and scattered hymnals. On the kitchen table sat the typewriter. A single sheet of paper was rolled into it. She hesitated before pulling it free. The words on the page, "Your death frees the rest." The walls began to shake. The front door slammed shut. The door chain locked itself in place. Elaine's screams carried down the suburban street. December 22nd, 1994, 3:04 a.m. Neighbors said the screaming stopped suddenly. The house went silent. When police entered later that morning, they found the typewriter still on the kitchen table. Next to it sat a stack of Polaroids. The last one was different from the rest. It wasn't old. It didn't fade. It showed Elaine sprawled on the floor, her diner coffee mug tipped over beside her. The timestamp read, December 22nd, 1994, 3:02 a.m., 2 minutes before the neighbors claimed the house fell silent. No body was ever recovered, only the Polaroids, and the final sheet of typewriter paper resting in the machine, still damp with fresh ink. The next heir has been chosen. January 5th, 1995, 9:12 a.m. The Carmichael house stood empty. Snow collected on its roof and around its foundation, muffling the silence inside. The property went into probate within weeks, but no buyer ever stepped forward. Investigators filed the case under an unresolved missing person. The official note read, Elaine Carmichael, disappeared without trace, evidence inconclusive. But to those who lived on that quiet suburban street, the truth was more unsettling. The house hadn't gone silent. It still made noise at night. Neighbors swore they heard the typewriter, January 19, 1995, 7:44 p.m. The parish secretary who had last spoken to Elaine never forgot the way the Polaroid appeared in the pew beside them. He later gave an interview, his voice unsteady. It wasn't possible. I was there. She was alive, speaking to me. Yet the picture showed her dead and lying exactly where she stood. He quit the church 2 weeks later, telling friends he couldn't walk past the pew without hearing the faint click of a camera shutter. February 2, 1995, 10:11 p.m. The Carmichael case faded from headlines, but in small circles, local historians, paranormal researchers, late-night radio callers, the story took on a second life. A cassette tape was found in a storage unit rented by Elaine's uncle years earlier. On it, his voice spoke the same warning. It's not inheritance, it's a covenant. Each heir pays until the bloodline ends. The tape ended with the sound of a typewriter key striking again and again, spelling one word. Chosen. March 12, 1995, 1:32 a.m. A trucker staying at the Highway Motel reported an encounter that still unsettles staff today. He claimed a barefoot woman approached him in the hallway, cigarette burning between her fingers. She asked him for a light, then vanished when he turned his head. The clerk found a Marlboro cigarette still smoldering in the ashtray outside room 6. No guest was checked into that room. April 9, 1995, 6:57 p.m. The house was placed on the market again. During the realtor's first walkthrough, she took photos for the listing. When she developed the roll, every frame was normal, except one. In a single photo of the kitchen, a figure stood behind the table, blurred, featureless. On the table sat the typewriter, and in the machine, half-typed, were the words, "The next heir has arrived." May 2, 1995, 9:15 p.m. The final witness account came from a college student who rented a flat nearby. She'd gone for a late-night walk past the Carmichael house when she saw a faint light glowing inside. Drawn by curiosity, she crept closer and peered through the window. What she saw was impossible. Elaine Carmichael, seated at the table, typing, her head lifted slowly, as though sensing she was being watched. The student ran before she could see more, but when she returned to her apartment, there was a Polaroid photo slid under her door. It showed her standing outside the Carmichael house, looking in through the window. The timestamp read, May 2, 1995, 9:14 p.m. Exactly 1 minute before she arrived, the Carmichael house remains abandoned. No heirs have stepped forward to claim the estate. Yet, police archives confirm anonymous reports of lights inside the house, faint sounds of a typewriter, and photographs appearing where they should not exist. Some say Elaine was taken. Others believe she became part of the covenant. But the most unsettling detail is this. Every new tenant who's looked at the property reports receiving the same thing in the mail before their showing, an envelope containing a Polaroid photo of themselves time-stamped the night before. The will named Elaine Carmichael as the last heir, but the photographs suggest otherwise. The end.